Hi guys, Adam here. Long time player, first time DM. Before I got everything started doing a campaign guide, or not guide, campaign diary, like Matt Colville and Jordan does, I kind of wanted to kind of catch you guys up with what's going on. This will also include the session we had on Sunday, but that way going forward, I don't have to go like, oh yeah, because this happened in the last game, or this happened in the previous one. That way, I can just start going on. I'll first start with talking about what my players are playing. So we have a human paladin named Nephis Domain. Yeah, we have a human ranger named Gregarious. We have a high elf fighter whose main specialty is sword and shield. Her name is, well, she says she hasn't come up with a full name right now, but her code name she's using for her backstory reasons is Zinkel. We have a Furbolg cleric named, hold on, let me check. We have a Furbolg cleric named Azal's Crankenroot. And we have I'm going to have to actually look this, because it's really hard for me to say it if I don't look at the name. We have a U1T, well, technically we're using the U1T pure blood stats, but we're flavoring it to be the U1T Malison. And his name is Arvik Sasuma. I had to look at the page. I have a thing for my players, and I had to actually look what his name is. It's really difficult for me to remember what it's called, because it's just such a weird name. So that's our team. The two humans, the U1T, the Furbolg, and the High Elf. Session 1, we didn't have the U1T and the Furbolg. We had a couple other, we had a couple other people who joined in later. So how the session went was we had our human ranger was in town buying supplies. Our high elf fighter was in town looking for some adventurers because she needed help with something that was going on where she was from. And we had our human paladin who was in town, part of her order, which she is a paladin of Bahamut. I said that part of her order said that she had to go out and help people. There's kind of like a pilgrimage type thing to kind of get used to how Bahamut wants you to go out and do justice and help people. He doesn't care about having temples. He doesn't care about how people worship him. As long as people go out and help people and go out and do justice, that's what he cares about most. So her pilgrimage is to kind of help out with that. So what happened was a little goblin group came in and started attacking the town. Took out the adventuring party that our high elf fighter was looking for. And so they all decided that they were going to go and find out what's going on with the goblin tribe. Granted, they were also told to go do this, well, asked to go do this, I should say, by the kind of leader of the community in the city. His name was Sharkon Blackstone. That's it. I'm looking at my notes because I can't remember some things off the top of my head. Sharkon Blackstone. He was the blacksmith of this community. He also kind of acts as the community leader. So he went and asked if they could go find out what's going on, why the goblins came and attacked. So they went to go buy supplies, and our other two players at the time came in late to the session. They were a Aarakocra rogue and a tiefling bard. So they happened to be in the same store that the players were in, but also buying supplies. They overheard them talking about the mission they were on, and they offered their services to come and help. So they went along, went to the... they went and found the goblin tribe, and what happened was they confronted the goblin tribe. Turns out, from the goblins, what the goblins said, that the adventuring party came in and slaughtered everybody but the people they sent in, and some of the people that just stayed behind. The only person who could speak Draconic, because the goblins spoke Draconic, they probably could speak Goblin, but they decided to speak Draconic, was our high elf fighter. And she wanted to try and figure out what was going on. She didn't want to attack the goblins. She wanted to see what was happening. So when she found that out and she kind of told everyone in the party, I told her that she noticed a little medallion on one of the goblins, on the goblin shaman chieftain, and that looked like this. I don't know if you can see because I just Yes, that's what the approximately what it looked like. Now, do you guys who know what that is? That is a crude version of the symbol for Tiamat. So our high elf fighter, let me say Zinkel. So Zinkel was talking to the goblins when eventually the topic of Tiamat came up. That means Nephis, our human paladin, overheard the word Tiamat, seeing as Tiamat is already a draconic name, a draconic word. Obviously, she would recognize it. So Nephis and Zinkel started talking to each other in common because they didn't think the goblins knew common. I knew that they could. I knew that they could speak common, but obviously the goblins didn't want them knowing that. So in common, they started talking about how people who follow Tiamat usually tell lies, or they usually do something in a way and make sure they get the upper hand, or they get what they want. So they all decided to talk in Elvish, which I think the only person who could not speak that was the rogue. The Aarakocra rogue could not speak Elven, but everyone else could. So they all started talking, coming up with a plan, saying like, "Hey, if something happened, like we're gonna say, okay, we're gonna go, and then we're gonna attack the goblins." The goblins didn't know what was going on. The goblin, the shaman, I had decided he was also gonna have the spell message, because I gave him like a couple spells, seeing as it's a level 1 goblin thing. I wanted to make sure that obviously a shaman's gonna have spells. I want to make sure they had something. So I prepared sending or message, and I also prepared the firebolt is what I prepared for him too, a little cantrip. So what happened was he had told some people told some goblins that he had put off in the distance, saying, "Hey, the second they leave, start attacking them, we'll take them out." So pretty much what happened was their surprise round also had the goblins go, not the ones that were in front of them, but the ones behind. So they were like, "Let's go," and then they all rolled for initiative, including the ones from the goblins in the back. They all went. Eventually, the goblins all went down. I don't think anyone in the party went down. So, yeah. So what happened is the goblins went down. They searched the camp, found out that they had gotten a letter from someone who is also a follower of Tiamat, telling them that Tiamat has told them that they need to go to the nearest settlement and take it over. Our human rogue, Gregarious, I'm going to say Greg, it's much shorter. Greg decided that, well, he didn't decide, he knew that the city of Willaro, which is the main capital city of this kingdom, which is where they all met up at, was not the closest settlement to this goblin camp. The closest settlement was a little town called Orlane, which people who know what that is, I will get to that later. So they decided to go back to Willaro to find out what's going on, to tell them what was going on, and kind of do that. So eventually they head back to Willaro. There was a random encounter with a boar that didn't take very long. So they got back to Willaro. They went and talked to Sharkan and told him what happened. They told him the goblins. They told him they were following Tiamat, and the fact that they had found that letter. Sharkan also mentioned, "Hey, that's weird. The encampment that you said, if it's where you said it was, shouldn't be the closest thing here. Orlane should be the closest thing. So hey, how about you go and talk to one of the clerics of Rayo, because Rayo is the main deity for this town." So we're like, hey, if we go talk to Rayo, the cleric for Rayo, maybe they will know what's going on. They can kind of point you in the right direction. So they do. They eventually go over to the cleric. First, the rogue, the rogue and Greg decide to go and buy a couple things really quickly. They go back and go follow them. They eventually get over to the cleric. They tell the cleric what's going on, and the cleric says, "Hey, you should go and talk to the regent. The regent would probably have a good idea what to do from here. He's been doing a couple things he's been trying to do a couple things. Maybe if you bring him this information, this will help him, and that would be really appreciated." So that was technically the first 2 sessions. I forgot to say there was a split, but there was the first 2 sessions of the game. After that, our tiefling and our rogue left for some reasons I'm not getting into. They're kind of personal reasons. So that's when I was like, okay, I need 2 new players. So I went to go ask a couple friends. They were like, sure, yeah, we'll join. That's where we get our Furbolg and our UNT. So what happened was we were like, okay, well, I need a session to introduce them because obviously I think it's really weird if these 2 people just kind of joined in with a really important conversation with the regent of this entire kingdom. So I was like, okay, so we're going to have a session with just introducing them. Well, Zinkel and Greg couldn't make it. They had been out of town, like the players had been out of town for like a week, came back in town the next day, and they're like, we're just too exhausted. There's things we need to get done. So I was like, okay, fine. So just those 3 people were in the game. It was Nephis, Azaz, and Avik Sasima. They were playing. So what happened next was I told Nephis that the rogue didn't come back last night. That she didn't notice that the rogue could come back. So she went downstairs to the barmaid and asked her, "Hey, have you seen our plague doctor friend?" Because the Aarakocra was dressed up as a plague doctor, so his appearance would be hidden. Because in my world, Aarakocras are extremely rare. Aarakocras mainly still sticking to the plane of elemental plane of air. They very, very rarely come to the material plane. So being a material plane, he didn't want anyone to take notice. He didn't want anything to try to do anything funny with him. He just stayed in the Plague Doctor's outfit. So obviously none of the other, the players, but none of the other characters of this adventuring party knew that he was an Aarakocra. They just knew he was some weird guy in a Plague Doctor outfit. So she was asking the barmaid, like, if she ever saw him come back last night. She was like, no, I saw him leave, but I don't know where he was. That introduces Avik Sasima, our UNT fighter who mainly does in bows. He was at the place where our rogue was. Now, to kind of go back in time a little bit to explain what happened, at the end of the second session, the rogue and I did a little thing because he was like, hey, I want to go and gamble. Well, I told him that gambling isn't really sanctioned here in Willaro. It's kind of looked down upon and very semi-illegal. So he was like, okay, well, I want to kind of go find an underground thing. So I told him, I was like, okay, make an investigation roll. And in my head, I said that if he rolled high, he'd be able to find some dinky place that he'd be able to take all their money if he wanted to. If he rolled really low, he'd go to the Thieves Guild, casino, the gambling house, and that's where he'd end up, where it'd be a lot harder to kind of rip him off. He rolled 4. So I was like, okay, so you're going to go to the Thieves Guild place. So he finds out that in an abandoned warehouse, there is this gambling house. He stakes the place out for maybe he said about 10 minutes, and he sees someone walk in, knock on the door, say something to the person who opened a little slot, and then walk in. I told him to make a perception check to see if he could hear what the password was. He rolled a 10, which wasn't quite enough to get the whole password, but I wasn't going to be like, you don't hear anything, because it was still kind of a decent roll. So I told him that he hears something along the lines of something crow, something midnight. That was what I told him. I had come up with the password, the crow caws at midnight. Which, given that it's very unlikely that he'd guess the password, but it was still a chance that he could guess it, or something close that would be good enough that I would be like, yeah, fine, whatever, you got it. So, but he guessed something completely incorrect, it wasn't even close at all. So I was like, yeah, he's not going to let you in. He knocks on the door again and says, hey, I have a lot of money, I can gamble, I place right here. And he was like, I had the guard say, how much? He said about 50, 60 gold that he would be willing to, gamble. That was enough. He's like, okay, come in, leave your weapons at the door. So he came in, put his weapons over in a little security area, and went in to start gambling. I told him many different things. I told him it was roulette. I told him there was blackjack, 3-dragon ante, all these kind of things. He decided to go to the blackjack table, and he wanted to cheat. He wanted to do sleight of hand to kind of get different cards. So I told him to make a sleight of hand check, and I would roll a perception check to see if anyone saw him. He ended up rolling an 18, and I ended up rolling a 13. So he got away with it. I told him that he ended up making about 25 gold through that, just adding on top, adding on top of the money he had already. And then he said, okay, I want to play another game. And I was like, okay, are you going to do that, or are you going to just play it straight this time? He said he was going to cheat again. I was like, okay. So I said, roll a sleight of hand check. I'll roll another perception check. He ended up rolling a 17. I ended up rolling like a nat 20. I was like, okay, yeah, this guy sees him. So I had the same bouncer, the guy who was at the front door, come up to him, pick him up by the arm and say, what are you doing? He's like, oh, I'm just playing a game. He's like, I caught you cheating. He throws him out. Doesn't give him back his dagger, like a single dagger. He doesn't give him back his one dagger, and he doesn't give him back a short sword. So what he decided to do was he was going to stake the place all night, not go to sleep. He's going to stay up all night, which I told him, I was like, if you do that, you're going to take a point of exhaustion. Are you okay with that? He said, yes, I'm going to do that. I was like, all right, so he gained a point of exhaustion. For those people who don't know, a point of exhaustion means you have disadvantage on all your skill checks. So what happened next was he waited up all night, eventually started seeing people funnel out, like a majority of people, because obviously people have been going in and out all night, but this is when a majority of people started leaving. So he decided he was going to stealth fly up to the roof to see if he can get in. I told him to make a stealth check. He rolls a 6. So I said, okay, someone sees you, they look up, they run back inside. He still lands on top of the roof. He asks if there's any holes. I told him no, based off of what you saw from inside. The place inside looks really nice. It's just the outside that looks really bad. It's kind of, keep the appearance of it being run down, but on the inside it looks really nice. So he decides he's going to bust it. So he literally flies out, busts into the window. I'm like, okay, you burst through the window. You see 6 guards pointing their crossbows at you. Because in my head, I was like, the person who saw him ran in, told the guards what was going on, and the guards, sat there prepared just in case something happened. He says he dive bombs down. I'm like, okay, you dive bomb, but you doing that means they're going to be able to take a shot at you. I had all 6 shoot him. Only 3 of them hit, and the other 3 completely miss. That puts him down to like -2 health, which obviously isn't enough to kill him, but it's enough to knock him out. So that's how that session ended. I ended the session with telling him that he's not dead, he's completely fine, but he's unconscious. And so then he left, and that. So what I said, going back to the next session, the U1T was at the casino that night, saw him, and actually lost money to him. Was what him and I decided outside of the game. We discussed how we would introduce him, and we said that was a good way. So he happened to be staying at the inn that they were, overheard Nephis asking about the plague doctor, and he was like, hey, I recognize that person. You and I should go look for him. He owes me money. So she was like, yeah, okay, well, let's do that. So they went and talked to the guard for Willar, which I call the Hand of Reo, which they have a book that has a census, like saying, hey, maybe he got out of town, or to see if he's still here. Hand of Reo ended up saying that he was still in town. So they're like, okay, that introduced our third player, or our last player, our Furbolg cleric Azaz. Azaz is a cleric of the god Grumble. My friend said that there was this book he liked reading, and then there was a deity from that book called Grumble, who is the god of minions. He's a kobold. So I was like, yeah, sure, you totally can do that, whatever, I don't care. So I said that sometimes clerics that are not clerics of Reo are sometimes brought in outside to kind of help out when it's needed. So the Hand of Reo told him to follow them, not discreetly, like to go with them to see if anything bad happened or if they did anything stupid, just to make sure that nothing bad was going on. So they eventually get to the they eventually find their way through investigation checks and talking with people, eventually get to the warehouse that this all took place. So what happened was, when I had planned this session, I was expecting them to try to stealth and sneak in, try to get him out, and just get out. What I did not expect, which they ended up doing, was they went up and knocked on the front door. So that took me by surprise, because I thought they were joking. I'm like, haha, yeah, he opens the door and everything. And then they started talking. I was like, oh God, they're serious. They did this. So what happened was they ended up talking. The U1-2 player and I had also discussed that he'd been in town and he would go to this gambling casino a lot over the past couple months. So that means he kind of got to know the people. So he says, hey, Gregory, which, funny enough, I don't think he remembered that one of our other players was gregarious, so I think that's kind of funny. He said, "Hey, Gregory, we need to get in some. There was a guy who came last night who owes me money. We think you might know where he is." So I tell him, "Okay, make a persuasion check," because he tells you the place is closed and doesn't want the boss getting upset at him. So make a persuasion check. He's completely succeeded. He got like a 25 total, which was ridiculous. I don't remember what it was on the die, but he's a pretty decent persuasion. And so they ended up going in. They ended up talking to the boss. The boss had to ask him a couple questions to see if they know what he looked like and how long they had known him for. Obviously, Neff has only known him she said only known him for 9 days, which was enough time, to go to the Goblin, come back, and that day. It was like about 9 days. So what happened was, he's like, okay, that's not enough time to really get to know someone. So he's like, yeah, go downstairs and do that. They had like 3 people total down there. They had a Goliath bound, they had an elf bound, and they had the Aarakocra. But the Aarakocra, where he was behind an illusion, so they couldn't see where that door was. So they go down, they open the other 2 doors, see the Goliath and see the elf, and they ask Nephis which one's more likely to be the guy. She's like, well, the Goliath's too big, so it's probably the elf. So they start talking to the elf. Eventually the elf, kind of gives hints and clues that it's like, yeah, I'm not this guy who you're talking about. So like, okay, well, let's make a perception check to the room. Eventually they notice that the illusion's on the door. They go in the door, start talking to Aarakocra, and he explains his situation and why he's in that. When Gregory opens the door, sees them where they're not supposed to be, and runs upstairs. 2 of the players are like, oh god, he's going to get more people, and they're going to come down and attack us. The UNT's like, no, it's fine. He's just doing his job. He probably checked in on us, was going back upstairs. They suddenly start hearing a bunch of footsteps coming down. So our Furbolg uses his ability to turn invisible, tie a chain that he had from one end to the other, and sit at the door, readying an action to attack anyone who came in the door. So the door flies open. They open it in like this. They run in. They topple over. Like two of them pass over. But it ended up being Gregory and this other guy that they ended up naming Walter. But the other 3 people fell to the ground and they're prone. Surprise round goes. Our Furbolg hits one of them and chunks him for like half his health. I'm like, okay, roll for initiative, everybody. Everyone starts going. Battle starts turning in over to the player's favor. One of the Thieves Guild people starts running up the stairs. He escapes. He's like, I'm gonna go. So he runs up the stairs. They eventually take out everybody, and then they're like, okay, what we're gonna do? That guy ran upstairs. Obviously, he's gonna come down with more people. So they start putting out the torches to kind of darken the area so it's harder for them to see. They only end up getting 3 before people start. They hear, rampant footsteps. So they hide. They pass their stealth checks remarkably. They passed their stealth checks. And so 2 people ran in, looked around, didn't see them. They ran over to where an open door was, which is where the elf used to be. He had bust out earlier, but that's not terribly important to the story. Run over. They run up the door. They start running out the door, and that's when one of them spots them. They're like, hey, you! Where are you going? So they get in the door. The Furbolg runs up the stairs to try to get to somewhere. Nephis then throws Avix Awesome. I'm just calling him Vix. Throws Vix out of the way and starts holding the door. I tell her to make a strength check. Only rolls 10 total, and I'm like, oh, there's no way you're gonna hold this door open, this door shut. But you start holding the door. Vix starts running up the stairs too, and then the 2 thieves people who are in the basement go. I'm like, all right, here goes the half orc. Rolls a 6. I'm like, oh my god. Okay, so the half orc can't bust down the door. So now it's the human rogue's turn on the other team. She goes at the door, rolls a 4 total. I'm like, oh my god, these people just can't roll high today. So she ends up holding the door. Ends up going her turn. They all run up the stairs. They eventually get to the top floor. Everyone's chasing up after them from the basement, and eventually get to the front. They look around. No one's there. The Vix runs out to try to get to the front door, slips on some grease. It ends up that the head of the Thieves Guild was there waiting for them. He had cast grease in an area he felt that they would run through, And the second Vix slipped on the grease, cast it on, put it on fire with fire bolts, and the place started catching fire. Eventually got to Azaz's turn, our Furbolg cleric. He notices there's a couple other doors, but they're boarded shut. And so I tell him, he's like, I want to take a run for it. I'm like, cool, make a strength check. Rolls a 13. I was like, you gotta. In my head, I had set the DC at 20. He had to roll higher than a 20 to be able to bust down the door. Doesn't quite make it. But I pretty much was like, you bust in the door and a crack forms in the board, but it doesn't open. And to me, I was like, okay, well, he got close, so it's not going to open it, but it's going to take the DC down a little bit. So that's when Nephis runs at it too, gets a 21, I think. Her strength score is pretty high. Gets a 21, busts open the door. They all start running. Eventually, they escape. Everything's going fine. What ends up happening next is the tiefling comes up and says, hey, did you find him? They're like, yeah, he's in the basement at that warehouse, but we couldn't get him. We had to run out. So the tiefling runs off. I say at least, because the player is no longer there, like obviously, like I said before. So she runs off to go help him. Eventually, they'll find some Hand of Rayo. They're like, hey, someone's being, like, these Thieves Guild has these people kidnapped, and we want to go help them. So they all run over. They get to the warehouse. The warehouse is on fire. Paladins start casting, the Hand of Rayo, who are paladins, they start casting Create Water to kind of help put it out. Eventually the fire is out enough. After 20 minutes of them trying to get the fire out, they run in. Everyone's gone, except for the people that they knocked out in the basement and the Goliath. The Aarakocra is gone too, completely. The Paladins start getting everyone up to kind of start asking them questions. They start interrogating the people who are still alive down there. They ended up casting Zone of Truth. And they're like, okay, who worked here? Obviously, I had everyone make charisma saving throws. Nephis decided she wasn't going to make one; she was going to let it happen. Our cleric and our UNT fighter make their checks. They're not affected by Zone of Truth. 2 of the bandits make the Zone of Truth. 2 of the Thieves Guild people make their save, but Gregory doesn't. Gregory doesn't make his save. So when they ask who works here, he raises his hand, and they notice that the other 2 did not. So he looks over Gregory, and he says, are these 2 lying? And he says yes. So all the Hand of Rayo start pulling their swords out, ready to go stab. When Vix says, hey, whoa, he actually doesn't work with them. He was just stating, we found him here tied up. He was going to go and tell you guys that this was here. And I said, okay, make a deception check. I didn't put it at disadvantage because the cleric, in my head, I said the paladins think that since everyone's affected by Zone of Truth, he wouldn't be too suspicious of it, so it was just a flat roll. He ended up rolling an 18, and the paladin rolled like a 16. It was close, but not quite. So I was like, okay, fine. So they look over the other 2 and just stab them through, twist, and pull their sword out. The cleric got really upset. He was like, hey, what happened to fair trial? That isn't fair to them. The paladins told them, hey, according to the laws and the law and the word of Rayo himself, these people disobeyed the laws, and multiple laws, and they put people in danger. So we had to kill them. We had to do justice. Our cleric was he was very, very angry at them. He was like, that is not fair, that you shouldn't do that. Of course, a god of justice would only care about his justice and blah, blah, blah. Starts going on rants about gods of justice. Now, as you know, Bahamut is a god of justice. So our paladin, Nephis, was not very keen on him doing that. So they got into a little bit of a tiffy argument type thing. They all end up going up with one of the Hand of Rayo. They tell one of them to go and escort them upstairs. They end up going. Vix brings Gregory around the side, and he's like, "Hey, if you run that way, I'll make a distraction. I'll tell you what the other way." Kind of get buddy. It was at this point that we decided that Gregory was going to be his criminal contact based off of his background. He needed a new one because of his backstory, so we were like, okay, Gregory is now your criminal contact. So Gregory left. The paladins ran the other way. They couldn't find him, and that's essentially how the session ended. There's a couple other things, kind of minor conversations they had with each other. But other than that, nothing substantial happened. So that's what happened. That's what happened in our game. Next time, our other two people are going to come in, and that's when they're going to go talk to the regent of this kingdom to get their next idea. What's going to happen now is I'm going to start the adventure against the Cult of the Reptile God, which, if you guys don't know, is a very old D&D like adventure that was in Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. It's really old, and I'm pretty much taking it. I'm going to convert some things, going to change a couple things to kind of fit with what's going on, and then let them go at it. So next time, you guys won't see me for probably not until next week. This game happens every other week, so these campaign diaries probably won't happen for and it's every other week. I'm trying to think of something to do on the other week. I had an idea before I decided to start doing campaign diaries that I might do. But I'm still kind of toying with it. I want to make sure that, it's a good idea and I'm going to have time to do it. So thanks for sticking around. I know this is a very, very long thing. I know half an hour is a long time to spend just listening to a guy ramble. So I hope you all have a wonderful day. Thanks for listening, and have a wonderful day.